Hi, I'm Mary Kopczynski, the CEO of Regulator. Welcome to this week's Regulatory Roundup. This week, there were 1,345 alerts from 265 unique regulators. 367 had to do with coronavirus. The regulator of the week is Freddie Mac. So it's hard sometimes to figure out the appropriate editorial balance for this show. But every once in a while, I see something and I just have to say something. Less than 1 month after Freddie Mac's CEO made a sweeping statement about the institution's obligation not only to call out and speak against inequity, but also show through our actions that we are committed to change. Well, that was some great lip service because I see this week that you promoted 2 more white dudes to your board. Nice, Freddie. Freddie also announced this week that we yet again hit a new historic low for mortgage rates in the entire history of Freddie tracking mortgage rates. So it's a great time to buy if you're lucky enough to have extra cash lying around. Bummer if you need to sell. And since we're on the topic today, the Federal Housing Finance Authority has proposed a new regulatory capital framework for Fannie and Freddie to ensure that what happened in 2008 doesn't happen again, and it's asking for comments. The topic of the week is regulatory modernization, beginning with the National Credit Union Administration. They are conducting a comprehensive study of alternative procedures to modernize the agency's exam program. They want to use data and technology to get a predominantly off-site exam and supervision model. The FDIC announced a rapid prototyping competition to help develop a new and innovative approach to financial reporting, particularly for community banks. 20 technology firms from across the country have been invited to participate in this hackathon. The Conference of State Bank Supervisors published a podcast on the future of consumer complaints. Meanwhile, the FTC data shows that there has been a record surge in online shopping complaints during the pandemic. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency announced that they're going to host another joint virtual Innovation Office Hours series as a part of their American Consumer Financial Innovation Network. Participants can come and discuss issues that touch both upon consumer protection and prudential regulation. They're one-to-one meetings, and reps from both of the meetings are there. I have gone. It is super interesting, and I recommend that you sign up and do it. The FTC is proposing to repeal the care labeling rule. You know, the labels you find on the tags of your clothes? Well, the FTC is wondering if it really matters this day and age to have such rigorous labeling standards. The Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities announced enhancements to their electronic filing system, so a greater range of corporation finance materials can be filed online. Similarly, the North Dakota Securities Department issued an order mandating that several applications and forms are going to be filed electronically. The Utah Insurance Department put out an alert on COVID-19 and medical ID cyber fraud. Michigan's governor launched the Office of Future Mobility and Electrification, which is a group focused on next generation transportation technologies. And I will close with a state announcement that juxtaposes the modern with the bygone era. The Minnesota governor signed an executive order that extends the tenure of the state's Blue Ribbon Council on Information Technology. For those of you following AML and KYC, the South Carolina Attorney General signed on to a bipartisan letter that includes 42 state attorney generals, letters to the U.S. Senate urging them to pass Senate Bill 2563, which spells out Illicit Cash Act, and it stands for the Improving Laundering Laws and Increasing Comprehensive Information Tracking of Criminal Activity in Shell Holdings. Speaking of shell holdings, FINRA is proposing to adopt FINRA Rule 3241 to create a uniform national standard to govern registered persons holding positions of trust. For those of you following crypto, The U.S. Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs hosted a virtual hearing entitled The Digitization of Money and Payments. The Financial Action Task Force concluded a big meeting by calling on its members to tackle new threats that have come up since the COVID-19 crisis. The organization issued new standards on virtual assets, and they completed a 12-month review of the progress made by the various jurisdictions on implementing those standards. At the meeting, the task force announced plans to build new counter-proliferation financing rules. They also adopted a groundbreaking report on money laundering and illegal wildlife trafficking. For those of you following cyber, the governor of North Carolina signed a whopping 24 bills into law this week, including Senate Bill 2012, Capital Appropriations, R&R, and Cyber Security. The U.S. Department of Labor announced $4.1 million in grants to community organizations to recruit, mentor, and train women to pursue successful careers in manufacturing, infrastructure, cybersecurity, healthcare, and other technical industries. For those of you following environmental issues, the CFTC's Market Risk Advisory Committee is meeting on July 21st, and they'll be hearing from their various subcommittees, such as the CCP Risk and Governance, the Market Structure, and the Interest Rate Benchmark Reform Committee, which means basically the LIBOR team. But it will also include an update from the Climate-Related Market Risk Subcommittee. Fannie Mae produced its second annual multifamily green bond impact report to provide metrics on the projected financial, social, and environmental benefits from the Fannie Mae green bonds for U.S. housing. The governors of Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, and South Dakota wrote a letter to the EPA to express concern over the EPA's willingness to consider 52 applications for retroactive small refinery exemptions. And the New York Attorney General, leading a coalition of 15 attorneys general and the city of Chicago, continued to demand that the Trump administration stop ignoring its legal responsibility to control methane emissions from existing oil and gas facilities. For those of you following LIBOR, the FFIEC issued a joint statement on managing the transition. The Alternative Reference Rate Committee decided on 2 further technical details related to its spread adjustments for cash products, and it also released its final recommendations for fallback language for student loans as well as syndicated loans. For those of you following privacy, it's here. The SBA and Treasury released detailed loan level data regarding the 4.9 million PPP loans that were granted. The FTC released the agenda for PrivacyCon 2020. The morning sessions are going to focus on research related to health apps, artificial intelligence, and Internet of Things. The afternoon is going to explore research related to the privacy of digital cameras and virtual assistants. The FTC released the final agenda for a July 13th workshop focused on their proposed changes to the GLBA safeguards rule, which is essentially the data privacy law for financial institutions. For those of you following social justice issues and just financial issues, the New York State Department of Financial Services reminded New York regulated banking institutions of their responsibilities under New York State Community Reinvestment Act. It's very similar to the federal CRA, but New York has additional provisions with respect to minority and women-owned businesses. They are also offering CRA credit for activities undertaken in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The California Department of Insurance launched Invest in Our Diverse Communities, an initiative to identify diverse women, veteran, LGBTQX, Latinx, Asian Pacific Islander, Black, and Native American-owned investment managers who can guide investments made by insurance companies into capital-ready, socially responsible, affordable housing and environmental projects across California. The California Department of Insurance prohibits the use of gender when it comes to car insurance ratings in California. They released an online tool that is updated that allows California drivers to figure out which insurance policies cost what, and they can be assured that their gender is not at play. HUD proposed a change that would allow local shelter providers to make decisions about what counts as equal access in their shelter in the case where constituents do not identify with a particular gender. There was lots of comments on both sides. In HUD's words, the proposed modifications better accommodate religious beliefs of shelter providers. Others think it's a major step backwards. In our Fine Tracker this week, a Seattle doctor was taken into custody for allegations that he fraudulently sought over $3 million in Paycheck Protection Program loans. He registered names of businesses with no actual operations, misrepresented the number of employees, payroll expenses, and concealed his own criminal history. New York Attorney General busted a fake Black Lives Matter foundation and has directed it to immediately cease and desist soliciting contributions because it hadn't registered as a charitable organization in the state of New York. Not to mention, it is diverting funds away from the real Black Lives Matter organization. In other federal news, the FDIC and the Fed gave the top 8 domestic banks the guide to their next resolution plans, which are due July 1st of 2021. The IRS announced that they have $1.5 billion waiting to repay taxpayers from the 2016 tax year. An estimated 1.4 million people didn't file in 2016, and they're going to forfeit their refunds. The SEC is soliciting comments on Form ADV, which is the Investment Advisor Registration Form. The White House reestablished the Ready Reserve Corps, focusing on public health. The CFPB issued an interim final rule to amend Regulation X, known as RESPA, to allow mortgage servicers to offer loss mitigation options in cases of forbearance caused by the pandemic. The SEC adopted new rules related to disclosures for variable annuity and variable life insurance contracts, which leads to our state news. The Idaho Department of Insurance updated the rate of interest on life insurance and annuities effective July 1st, 2020. Michigan passed a new auto insurance law that allowed Michigan residents to get better rates, at least rates that were more comparable to the national rates. And finally, in booze news, South Dakota's Department of Public Safety will resume its monthly statewide sobriety checkpoints starting in July, so don't drink and drive. Ever. That's it this week for Regulalytics US Alerts. Join us every Wednesday morning on LinkedIn. Regulalytics US Alerts is the #1 source of rules and announcements for every agency in the United States. Click to subscribe to our weekly roundup of US Alerts. Follow us on LinkedIn and visit us at www.regulalytics.ai.